Okay, for this next portion, we're really going to be focusing on image noise and contrast to noise ratio. We'll break down the two types of noise we do need to consider. That's periodic noise, which is basically electronics noise, and random noise, which comes from quantum model. Additional gradation processing occurs once the pre-processing of the image has been completed, and this is just one final adjustment before the image is presented. And then perceptual tone scaling by Carestream Kodak may be useful to understand, but just know that for the purposes of the ARRT registry exam, you can skip this portion. The registry does not test you on vendor-specific technology or terms. We'll also talk about formatting of the digital image for display. All right, the two types of noise are periodic and random. Periodic noise is that electronic noise. It's inherent in all electronic devices. It produces small artifacts around the same size. This looks uniform and in regular patterns across the image in the same frequency, which means it's going to be found in the same frequency layer and can easily be removed by a frequency processing filter. Random noise is caused by quantum model. What causes quantum model? Insufficient X-rays at the image receptor, meaning not using enough mass in most cases, or can be caused by KVP being too low for the part size. The artifacts displayed in quantum model are more irregular in size and pattern across the image, typically occurring in areas of variation in patient size. They're going to be found at different frequencies within several different frequency layers. So it's much more difficult to remove by using frequency processing as a result. It's best removed by spatial domain processing algorithms, which, if you recall, is pixel location specific. Please be able to distinguish the difference between periodic noise and random noise. Here's a good example of an image with no noise reduction versus a noise reduction filter. If you spent any time on Instagram, you'll be familiar with some of the filtering options available that'll take 20 years off your selfies. It's the same process being applied to radiographs for specific situations. Contrast to noise ratio can also be referred to as contrast resolution. Defined as the difference in signal intensity between two different tissue areas in an image, divided by the background. Don't worry about the formula here. You won't be required to calculate anything. Just remember that CNR software is manufacturer specific. Each manufacturer designs their own software to reduce image noise without compromising image contrast. In this image, you can see more noise in the top image than the bottom, but the scale of contrast hasn't been changed. When the computer gets ready to format the image for display, the display system, meaning the monitor, is the weakest link in the imaging chain, and it always has been. The detectors are the acquisition component of the system, and those are very sophisticated. The number of pixels available from the detector must match the number of pixels on the display monitor for the best image display possibilities. This is also why it's not recommended to manipulate your image to look good at your technologist workstation. You might be working with a $100 monitor with a very limited number of pixels for display and trying to make improvements while the radiologist is sitting back there with a $20,000 monitor with extremely high resolution and more than capable of matching or even exceeding the pixel count when compared to the detector. It's important to note that the brightness and contrast must match in both systems, and the dynamic range needs to be more sophisticated in the detector when compared to the display, so you can manipulate brightness and contrast at the monitor with window width and window level adjustments. All of this happens behind the scenes as a pre-processing operation. All of the systems must be in the standard DICOM format. DICOM meaning Digital Imaging and Communication in Medicine. We're going to discuss that in the next module. As you can see, these DICOM formatted images are coming from every modality and stored into packs. And this uniformity in formatting allows us to share images between different manufacturers and institutions. Let's summarize pre-processing versus post-processing for our digital images. The first 7 dots here in black font are all pre-processing functions handled by the software. They're the default processing steps for any system to be able to display the images on the monitor. Once you reach the operator adjustments, the technologist can apply edge enhancement and smoothing effects to accentuate anatomy based on the reason for the exam. Post-processing is what you're likely more familiar with. They're adjustments made at the console by the technologist or the radiologist, and they include annotations, adding text or arrows. I see a lot of techs out there annotating their markers, which is a horrible idea. I've seen so many issues pop up when a tech relies on annotating their markers and for whatever reason annotates the wrong laterality, but that's a topic for another discussion. Just use your lead markers. But you can annotate arrows, for example, where the pain might be, or type upright or prone to better communicate to the radiologist the important specifics about the exam. Windowing, meaning window level adjusting the brightness and window width adjusting the contrast. This gets paired with the default gradation processing from the lookup table that you selected. And that's done when you identified the part or projection prior to image acquisition. Edge enhancement and smoothing operations you may or may not perform, but the radiologists more commonly perform those. Remember, these can both be performed in the spatial domain or the frequency domain. Kernel operations happen here with your high pass and low pass filter operations. If you're flipping, rotating, or zooming the entire image, these are happening in the spatial domain because it includes all of the pixels, which is location specific. Let's quickly review the overall processing operations. Spatial domain processing is where field uniformity and Dexel dropout corrections, which we'll discuss later, detail processing, and noise reduction occur. Intensity domain processing is where histogram analysis, image rescaling, gradient processing, and windowing occur. Frequency domain processing happens in post with edge enhancement and smoothing, or detail and noise reduction occur. Make sure you review the 18-point summary at the end of the chapter in your textbook. That'll help you for the quiz. This image has some other post-processing functions, and it looks like a Fuji interface, but you can see stitching, the S values, which for Fuji is their exposure indicator system. Shadow masking, which is different than cropping, image rotation, and some other functions you're probably already familiar with. This is some of the more advanced settings that are coming. Dynamic visualization is something Fuji is developing to use for facial recognition algorithms. AI technology will identify bone, soft tissue, and muscle automatically, and it applies the best processing to match the body parts shown in the image. And then added abilities for image manipulation are going to reduce patient dose and improves diagnostic quality. We'll wrap this section up with a couple of additional items to discuss, one being dual energy subtraction, and then we'll talk about grid suppression. Dual energy subtraction processing separates the image into soft tissue only and bone only images. This allows you to see either soft tissue or bone only, and you can focus on one or the other when evaluating pathology. This is extremely useful if, for example, a soft tissue pathology is superimposed by the bone and more difficult to visualize. This can be accomplished using 2 different methods. The first approach uses 2 images taken at low kVp and high kVp in quick succession. The second uses a filter placed between two IR plates to capture the low energy photons to create the soft tissue image, and the high energy photons for bony detail, all with a single exposure. Both methods take advantage of the photoelectric absorption characteristics to visualize the differences between bone and soft tissue. Here's a good example of the first scenario using two exposures at different kV settings. The top left image is the low, set at 56 kVp for that exposure, and the top right image is using 120 kVp with 1 millimeter of copper filtration. Remember, filtration is going to remove low energy X-rays that don't really contribute to the image quality, but get absorbed in the tissue. The bottom, after processing, shows the difference using dual energy subtraction techniques. On the bottom left, you see all the lung detail and soft tissue without the bones, and the bottom right, it shows the bones with all the tissue subtracted. Dual energy is something you'll often see in CT and mammography as well. This last part we'll discuss is how the grid line suppression works. Grid lines from stationary grids, or whenever you're not utilizing a reciprocating bucky, can often be seen on your images. These artifacts are easily identified by the computer software and can be removed. They're unique because they typically occur in a single axis in the image and are classified as low-frequency phenomenon because they show up as long, straight lines. Because of their uniformity, a high-pass filter will filter out all the unwanted low frequencies, which removes the grid lines from the image. This last image shows what we call an alazing artifact or moire pattern without the high-pass filter applied. This can typically occur in CR imaging when the grid frequency and image plate scan frequency are too close, but that's a whole other discussion. It's a little more complicated than that, but just know for now that you could acquire a similar appearance of an image if the high-pass filter isn't performed.